A lot.
Okay, this is your Gaza war. I don't know if this is a sit rep. I think it'll be more or less a sit rep. It's day 178, and I have Nora and Sina with me tonight. Um, so we have a bunch of things. Of course, the main thing which Nora is going to handle mainly is the carnage in Shifa Hospital. So after the withdrawal, which I reported yesterday, we've actually had a chance to see what Israel did in there, and that's what we're going to report on. It is um, a magnitude of atrocity that has surprised even us jaded watchers of 178 days of atrocities surpassing atrocities. But a couple of other notes then that I missed. A couple of days ago, the Israelis attacked United Nations observers in Lebanon. These were reported as Lebanon blasts in the New York Times. They called them Lebanon blasts. And someone on Twitter made a note of how funny that is to exonerate Israel as a new linguistic invention to exonerate Israel. The draft of the ultra orthodox that was building up to be a thing in Israel has happened. So now the ultra orthodox religious Israelis are eligible to be drafted into the military. I don't know whether they're going to actually be drafted into the military or what's going to happen when they are, but that has happened. Netanyahu, who was apparently in surgery, is out of surgery and in good health. And the other a couple of things that were of note was, I think yesterday I reported that the tribal councils that were involved in distributing aid, they were attacked by Israel. So Israel kind of tried to engage them as an alternative to Hamas distributing aid to the starving people in the north of Gaza. And once they got involved in that, or whether they wanted to insist that the legitimate government of Gaza be the ones to distribute it, whatever the reasons, Israel began to assassinate them. So huge numbers of these tribal leaders were assassinated quickly. And today, we have a report from the World Central Kitchen. So you know that John and I reported on this last week or the week before. This tons of food aid that came, and they've started sending boats from Cyprus and the sand pier that they built, or the rubble pier now, to be an alternative to UNRWA. Israel decided UNRWA was not going to be acceptable to them. So the World's Central Kitchen stepped in, this charitable organization from Europe, which in full coordination with Israel, full collaboration with the marginalizing of the United Nations, and in compliance with every one of Israel's wishes. Nonetheless, Israel assassinated a bunch of their personnel, nationals from Australia, some other European countries. So Poland, Australia, Ireland, and the United Kingdom, they killed 5 of these humanitarian aid workers in Deir el-Balah. So the principle seems to be pretty clear. It's just they're going to kill anybody who's feeding Palestinians. And, I don't, it's, it seems like they've lost their minds, but there is a certain consistency when you think about it in terms of doing what they need to do to starve Palestinians, and that's a fairly consistent objective, as is the destruction of hospitals. There was the 2 other things there. As far as I could tell, there was yet another fairly coordinated attack between an Israeli airstrike and then ISIS or Nusra or HTS on the ground are attacking in Syria. And then there was a major airstrike in Syria at the Iranian embassy that killed an important military leader, Abu Mahdi Zahedi. So we will talk about that because that's big news. It's a major escalation by Israel, in addition to all these other attacks on all these other international personnel over the past 48 hours. So there's just a lot of escalatory moves in the past couple of days, especially today. So Nora, I'll let you. You just wrote a report for Electronic Intifada about what you've put together from people who are in the hospital now in Shifa after the withdrawal of the Israelis from Al-Shifa. So over to you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Justin. Um, yeah, I think we all went to bed last night watching the testimonies of people who survived the 14-day siege at Shifa, beginning to emerge, as well as photographs and videos of people going to Al-Shifa to try and find their loved ones or medical staff colleagues. And just, it was, at least on my Twitter feed, it was like an avalanche of the most gruesome. I mean, I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, kind of images. And then it all, came into focus. And what we saw was just photo after photo after photo after video of burned corpses of people, like dead bodies in the hallways that had been zip tied and executed by Israeli forces. Um, Parts of children's bodies that were found in the in the dirt around Shifa, that had been uh, children that had been bulldozed. Um, and so, waking up this morning and reading through the official reports that had come out from the Gaza government media office, from the Ministry of Health, from the resistance factions, from journalists, from humanitarian aid workers, from healthcare personnel, and from families who were giving eyewitness accounts of what they saw and what their families went through. Yeah, I compiled that into a report up on the Electronic Intifada right now. And this was the third piece that I wrote over the last 2 weeks of this siege and massacre at Shifa. And I mean, and this 2 week siege and massacre was the fourth time that Shifa was attacked since I believe the beginning of November, when it first was besieged. And it's, I mean, we always talk about how we have no words left, but these images and these testimonies were just unspeakable. I mean, the Israelis, once again, it's not like they have to justify it for anyone anymore. But they once again, regurgitated these claims that it was a Hamas or Islamic Jihad command and control center inside the hospital, that, every one of the Palestinians that they killed was a, quote unquote Hamas terrorist. We saw Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister and a high level Israeli government official person, came out today with a tweet, very self-congratulatory, like this was a remarkable military achievement that the Israeli military engaged in, and he said not one civilian was killed, not one. I mean, just unbelievable, psychotic, uh, statements by these Israelis. We saw a couple days ago and I put this in the piece as well, the Israeli Army Chief of Staff, Herzl, I can't even remember his last name, Halevi maybe. He he was I guess speaking on Israeli army TV, and it was picked up by Khan, which is one of the Israeli TV stations. And he was saying, like, our mission is very clear. We've made it very, very obvious that hospitals are not a safe place. Right. So just like full blown, I mean, we always talk about how international law doesn't apply. It's become meaningless at this point. Um, but like absolute admission of genocidal war crimes, and boasting about it and bragging about it. And then, you see like Bennett saying not one civilian was killed, as we're seeing parents pulling parts of their children out of the rubble. And Shifa, which was since I believe it was opened in 1946, so it's older than the entity itself. It was the largest medical complex in the Gaza Strip. It was a state-of-the-art hospital. It had special ICU wards and surgery buildings, and maternity, and obviously an emergency department. The entire complex, which is huge. It's a huge, central feature in Gaza City. The entire complex has just been reduced to ash and rubble. And I don't really know what to say. It is clear that, and I know you and John have talked about this over the last few months, but like it's clear that hospitals are the target, that this was, a mission by Israel to just wipe as many people out as possible. And I do also want to point out that the Palestinian resistance factions, to the best of their ability, engaged in really phenomenal, fierce battles to defend Shifa and the complex and the neighborhoods around it. And I don't want that to go unnoticed, but it is remarkable that the Palestinians haven't run out of munitions, that they were very tactical in their defense of Shifa. And early this morning, the Israeli forces withdrew. Uh, and so that's the situation at Shifa. I mean, Shifa being the central feature of Gaza's medical system, and now that it's been completely destroyed and decimated, it's. I mean, I don't even know like what to say about the healthcare system now, but the impact that this will have on the absolutely collapsed medical system already across Gaza is is going to be significant. Um, at the same time that they were besieging Shifa over the last 2 weeks, they were also attacking other hospitals. Al-Amal Hospital in Khan Yunis was essentially put out of service last week after a 40-day siege by Israeli forces. It's also the headquarters of the Palestine Red Crescent Society. And it's inoperational now. There was a resumed attack on Nasser Hospital, also in Khan Yunis. And there's also attacks, I believe, at Al Auda Hospital. I mean, this is a genocide, and striking hospitals, and creating places where there is no safety, where there's no healthcare, where there's no care, is the point. And so that's the situation with Al-Shifa. I mean, it is one of the most like disturbing, uh, uh, the Euromed Human Rights Monitor said today that the massacre at Al-Shifa is one of the most like significant massacres in all of Palestinian history.
Absolutely.
That it's, more people were killed at Shifa. I mean, we're talking about at least 400 people killed. More people were killed at Shifa than in like the massacres in 1947 in Deir Yassin. And it's incomprehensible. And this is a fucking hospital. This was a hospital.
Yeah. And I was talking to Tarek about this. Tarek works in
Yeah.
Al-Shifa. These are a lot of his colleagues were taken off and executed,
Yeah.
and it's like also like knowing that the medical establishment here in North America is completely fine with this, that there's no
Yeah. There's
there's
nothing, there's
abs
no,
yeah, there's no solidarity. Their loyalty is to racial supremacy first, and there's no doctor solidarity. There's no none of that. I did want to use Ibn Riyad, one of the resistance accounts, where he kind of reminds us, the Israelis did not withdraw from Al-Shifa hospital willingly. They were forced out by the noble Palestinian resistance, who inflicted unbearable losses on their monstrous forces.
yeah.
The Israelis burned Gaza's biggest hospital down to avenge the humiliation of their impotent army. So that's an important point too.
100%. Yeah.
But it's like we still have to mourn, right? Like we can realize that this was not that it didn't go uncontested, that the Israelis actually spent it is even more gruesome in a way when you realize the Israelis spent lives. They spent their own lives to do this. They sacrificed their own soldiers in significant numbers, their own armor. They let them die so that they could commit this atrocity. The other one thing that I wanted to note, and I haven't exactly figured out what this means, but there was an announcement from the Islamic resistance in Iraq today. They said the Islamic resistance in Iraq has prepared its equipment to supply the brothers from the Islamic resistance fighters in Jordan with what satisfies the needs of 12,000 fighters of light and medium weapons, anti-armor launchers, tactical missiles, millions of ammunition, and tons of explosives, so that we can stand as one hand to defend our Palestinian brothers and avenge the honor of Muslims that was offended. So I don't know what that means. I mean, Iraq has a border with Jordan.
It's a big border.
I assume there's been transfers of weapons that have happened already, but I've never seen an announcement like this, and I don't know what it means. But I will definitely be watching it and covering it here as it unfolds. So Sina's here too, and Sina, we there's a major and a really important Iranian commander. His name was Mohammad Reza Zahedi, and apparently there's a picture on another resistance account, Arya. I always go to Arya for daily summaries, Aryjeeay. And here's an image of Soleimani, Nasrallah, and Mohammad Reza Zahedi. So he's one of these really important leaders. He was in the Iranian embassy in Damascus, I guess, in Syria when he was assassinated. So this is an attack on Iranian. If the embassy is Iranian soil technically, so it's an attack on Iran, and Al-Assad and others have said it's the goal is just to try to widen the conflict, to try to get more, to try to get Iran into the war so that they can get America into the war so that they can try to start World War III, and similar moves in Lebanon and other promises of escalation and escalation. So, I mean, it might be, I don't know, Sina, if you want to talk about like generally about Iranian role in the conflict and the axis of resistance, or whatever else you wanted to add to this.
Yeah, I mean, so I thought I would go over the details a little bit, Justin. I sent you a picture.
Absolutely.
It's just a shot of what was hit today. What's interesting is that the Canadian embassy is right next door. This was part of the compound of the Iranian embassy. This was part of the embassy. And this is an act of war in the sort of traditional,
Yeah.
scheme of things. I mean, this raises an interesting point that we've brought up many times, is that like we're sitting here by saying that, right? That by saying this is an act of war, whatever, this is international law, we are enacting like a play, a theatrics of lawfulness that the other actors in this conflict are clearly have never respected, forget discarded. They like have never respected that, and in fact use that script as a weapon itself in waging and like allying itself and doing genocide. So they literally drop packages on Palestinians to kill them with the shitty aid that they're like, as a symbol of how defeated you are. Like, look what we can do to you. So in the meantime, part of Israel's strategy, what you have to understand today, this attack, we should go into the 5 Ws. I sent you another link, I think, to a Telegram post of the names of the figures. These were senior IRGC officials. One was kind of the linchpin, Zahedi, so-called linchpin. I've heard him being referred to as a linchpin of the Syrians, of the strategy in Syria. And then there were other names. Justin, if you want to put it on the screen, you can. I don't know if you want to. You don't have to. But the picture of the thing, that it's of the actual compound, the aerial picture. And also so I would say the details are at this point sort of out there, but in terms of understanding this, I would hope to think that like I've had, like you watch these things unfold in real time and you try to sort of like think about the trick is, I mean, I feel that like the trick for me is to, whatever emotions I may have, that like first of all, like I'm not like involved in any of this, as like I'm a spectator. So like what does it even mean for me to have an opinion about like what should be done? Like that's the first thing. But more importantly, like this is a long war that's been waging for like over a decade, specifically this theater of war being Syria. That this is not the first time. There's a shot, and there's the Embassy of Canada. Wow. I've been outside the Embassy of the Iran. I've been outside because I was going to the Canadian Embassy, and also I was standing outside marveling at it. It's a very beautiful building, and it has these nice tiles on the front. And I was admiring them, and the security guard yelled at me.
I bet.
He's like, move on. And I was like, sorry. I was just looking at it.
One does not.
One does not do that. It was one of those moments. But I'm trying, I think at this point, what I've heard, like the general strategy of these kind of what could be called sort of slap in the face attacks, for the Zionists is just that. It's a provocation, right? Like it's a provocation in the hopes of getting into like, this global cataclysm in which the US by definition has to get involved in, like, and its many allies and proxies. And so that's the goal, right? Because this is a Hitlerite regime. First and foremost, that's how Hitlerite regimes work. It's a flailing one at that, so it's extremely dangerous. It's armed to the teeth with everything and has nuclear weapons, right? So there's an important thing in all of this to remember, right? We know that if Israel is really under threat, they will nuke Iran. This is a new, like if they were in a war, if Iran acted with its missile power, which effectively is a nuclear missile, like a nuclear capability in terms of its destructive force, Iran could rain hypersonic missiles upon upon basically the entirety of Israel, in the sense that, across the country, but also where its population centers are. If it were true that this is the sort of picture of the Zionist paint of Iran has the capability to do that already. But if it were to do that, Israel would use its nuclear weapons, right? And so like the death and devastation in Gaza, right? Like this would be on the scale of like, and potentially like a global nuclear winter, because they're psychotic. Because they're psychotic, and they would use their entire arsenal, because that's how they work. right? So this, in the context of all these things, you have to think about these IRGC guys. First of all, let's be real for a second. They dream of martyrdom. This is getting martyred in an attack. This is what they believe in. These are their earnest beliefs. You can dismiss it being a secular person or whatever. You can, like, but this is their beliefs. They don't hide in their tanks and behind a genocidal air force that, like, they operate out in the open. Israel has been attacking Syria for over a decade, right? Through its proxies, the FSA and ISIS, and also through its big daddy America, and including other powers too. So Damascus,
and just bombing Damascus, and just constantly bombing Damascus.
And these are slap in the face attacks, right? Like, these are intended to, first of all, insult the sort of the countries involved. Say, look how powerful we are. We can do this anytime we want. We can either use our F-35s and scream in there and, like, drop this stuff and run and never risk, or we can do it from, I think these were F-35s I read, but, like, they do it also with I think like
drones,
they do it with drones, but also I think they fire, like, missiles from Israel too. Like, they use a sort of variety of tactics, and the whole point is to simply draw out conflict. But it's really, like, this is psychological warfare for the Israelis.
And it's also their exit strategy. Like, is this
who's
how Israel's?
Like, I think it's glorifying it to call it a strategy. It's not a strategy.
Strategy of
They don't have a strategy. They're, like, completely.
It's not that they don't. It's the way the Israelis think, which I feel I'm starting to understand.
Justin, you're doing Orientalism. No,
it's
just
the way,
kidding.
yeah. It's the way Israelis think, the way neocons think in general.
Yeah.
It's like it's not a methodical game plan. Right. We're gonna do this, that, like a decision tree.
It's impulsive.
It's a chaotic. It's we have the bigger weapons, so we don't need a strategy. We just fire our weapons. We commit assassinations. We commit bombings. We break things. And then we see what further opportunities there are to exploit. So it's the resistance that has this methodical strategy. And you also, you need to be more strategic if you have less firepower. So they always think, we have the bigger guns. We don't need all this fancy strategic thinking.
So the other thing I wanted to say about these IRGC guys too is that I'm of two minds of this, and I've said this on different episodes about this stuff, is that, what does an individual actually do, right? Like, what does a single individual, when you're talking about a war involving countries of millions that are scaled over the course of decades, right? And then extracted from that is the fact that these are old countries themselves, except for Israel, which is a fake country, but the countries surrounding them, and they have military experience and history. And, like, sure, Israel is nothing that the world has ever cooked up. It's like the hyper demonic final boss of the planet. I mean, not really, because that actually is the US. By the way, the US is like a big Israel, guys. Like, and, like, you can't, so in the midst of all this, like, I think there is a tendency to be emotional for, like, and to read this stuff. And also, like, this is the game, like the war between the regional war that's slowly cooking up. This is a definite step up the so-called escalation ladder, right? Like, whatever happens after this, I mean, because there's also targets that the Iranians could hit, equivalent targets, right? There's, like, in terms of hitting an embassy, and Iranians have not shied away from hitting Zionist bases of operation, right? So this was the Erbil attack. I should have sent a link, Justin, because there's actually a speech by John Bolton that's basically said, they attacked an Israeli. He basically admitted to the fact that this was an Israeli base. And if you looked at the pictures, it was like reinforced concrete. Like, this was not I think it was like a TV station. No, it was a villa. It was like this exclusive villa. And the fact is that, like, Israelis are deeply active in Erbil. And it's like, this is Iran's ability to sort of ring Israel with a bunch of, like, enemy, I just said proxies, but I'm using the term correctly. But basically, like basically an array of forces that it arms and it coordinates is that its ability to do that. Israel has tried to do that using principally Iraqi Kurdistan, Erbil, and also parts of Syria that are occupied by the U.S. That's where the U.S. does it cooks up all its little schemes, like a Batman villain, and also God, where my brain just farted, and Azerbaijan, right? Azerbaijan is a major ally of Israel, a major important strategic ally. Now, like in terms of oil, energy resupplies, like it's sort of a bit dodgy now, but Azerbaijan is a primary supporter of the Israeli regime, and you never hear about it. You don't never hear the guy's name. It's a completely like like all the things that let's say Syria is assailed for is that, oh, being under the control of this, dynasty, being anti-democratic, no free speech, whatever. Oh, these are all true for Azerbaijan, right?
Yeah.
But you never hear about it. But it's this oil-rich country in the middle of a very, very sensitive zone, and it has very good relations with Israel. And so like it tried to do what Iran has managed to do, but then in doing so is exposing itself to the very same attacks that Israel throws at Iran and Syria, right? And so that's my sort of general takeaway, is that like, as much as this stuff, it is an escalation, and it's a pretty major one, I think, in terms of like the longue durée, but the individuals themselves, the losses, I think that militaries have hierarchies for a reason. They have dudes who replace other dudes for a reason. This is a country of millions. The IRGC has a lot of dudes. Like, it's not an experienced dudes. And like that picture, I think, you showed the picture from Arya. Like the fact that most of those guys are gone, if not all, has that weakened the IRGC and its war? No, right? Like this is like a generational struggle in a sense for them and how they consider it, that they pass it on, and like you die, right? You're martyred. So that's my kind of general takeaway. I think it's the Shifa, I would say the context of Shifa, like there's a major colonial attack force. I don't forget, I mean, I'm not saying you guys forget, but I think in general in the discourse, we forget that the West Bank is subject to like colonial raids every day on the scale of like France and Algeria in like the 50s. Just like, and hundreds killed, thousands kidnapped. Like this is like Israel is firing on all cylinders. And if you can also show, Justin, if you could show that link I sent you through WhatsApp, his name is
Epstein.
Let's look at this stat, okay? Look at this stat. Look at it. I'm so excited to show you this stat. Look. For people who are listening on audio, Israeli, this is from Itali Epstein. Oh, that's unfortunate.
Itai Epstein. Is that real? That's just okay.
Itai.
All right.
Oh, Italy. I said Italy. That's funny. I was talking more about the Epstein.
It doesn't get more Israeli than Itai Epstein.
Israeli military spending is now set at 6.7% of the gross domestic product, fake stat, far exceeding a defense expenditure of NATO countries, including the US 3.4, and the UK 2.07. This is a sign of protracted war in Gaza and a possible regional spillover beyond the current conflagrations with Hezbollah. So Israel, and mind you, this was leaked in Politico, okay?
Right.
I think, but be wary of Politico. It's a big Zionist. Like sock puppet. So this is to read this as, I would say, the fact that like this is such an obvious cue that this is a kind of part of like the psyop of saber rattling of Zionism, like to Lebanon this whole time, which has never actually thing. But yeah,
and the tweet above that that you didn't show was I think it was some Israeli minister basically saying that the Rafah invasion, which they're still planning on doing, has like a 6-month timeline. So yeah, there it is.
It's crazy.
So
they don't have 6 months. They don't have dudes.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have dudes.
Well,
this is crazy.
Well, if they get the Yeshiva dudes.
I don't know. I mean, those guys are not gonna. You're not gonna turn those guys into fighters. I mean,
they're too busy spitting at Christians.
Yeah, it's that's not gonna solve any problem. But
insane.
But I don't know that they don't have the resources. I think they are stretched pretty thin right now because they have to watch their border with Lebanon. They have the West Bank is exploding, and they haven't come close to finishing in Gaza yet. So
the Biden administration today just said that it's thinking about approving another $18 billion
right.
in
But
weapons.
these
This is
figures,
like over and above. Yeah.
the figures don't mean anything. That's what, like, the military budget, these are all relative numbers.
Yeah.
You can print money. You can't print shells. You can't print soldiers, and you can't print officers, and you can't print tanks.
Yeah, the
So
tanks. I mean,
the amount of money
they're using tanks from like the 1980s now.
Right. So these are real, there are real problems beyond that can't be solved by releasing further tranches of US money. And the budget, the military budget, all this military budget doubling means is that they're going to have to divert more resources from their civilian economy to the military. And
the economy that's already tanking.
The economy that's already tanking.
Their GDP is like down 20%, I think, and that was like a figure from a couple months ago.
Yeah, and the economy is never, I don't know of a careful study of this. I suspect the Israeli economy has never been a money maker in any sense. I suspect it's always been a money suck from America. But America also doesn't have infinite resources, even for Israel. Israel is tiny compared to everything America is doing in the world, but it's growing. It's a growing cost. And they're trying to fight Russia in Ukraine, and they're trying to fight China and Taiwan, and they're trying to maintain control of the Middle East. And all of this is not just a matter of money. It's a matter of real resources. And it's a matter of people who can, like John always likes to say, strap on their military gear and walk what does he say? 1 foot in front of the other into a tunnel to do knife fighting in the dark with Hamas. And they have not shown any willingness to do that now. Will they show a willingness to do that in 6 more months? Can anything in the next
plus
6
fighting
months
on fronts like in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, possibly Iran, like
but here's the weird thing though, is that their fighting consists of bombing local populations, right? Like their whole thing is air power, right? Like they can't do anything in northern Lebanon, northern Palestine. They're stuck. They're stuck. What are they going to do? Go fight for the Litani? Like they're going to go grasping for that? It's insane. What they will do is they're upping the attacks in Beirut, right? Like Beirut will be a theater of this.
But like Nasrallah has said many times, and since 2012 or so, he's said you're not going to get to destroy Beirut for free this time. You destroy Beirut, we destroy Tel Aviv. And I think maybe they're willing to do that. At this point, it looks increasingly like they want to make that trade.
It's the Hitlerite thing that's activated.
Like Hitler's
full destruction. Like
Hitler
Hitler
ended very disappointed in the German people that they didn't have the strength. I was watching an American historian of World War II, and you know how they're obsessed with the Nazis, and they're obsessed with the Americans interrogated the Nazis and kind of assimilated them back into NATO and everything. And there was some interview with one of these NATO.
They hired them at NASA.
I said NATO generals, but I meant Nazi generals. Apologies. I don't know if that qualifies as a mix-up, but they asked one of these Nazi generals. They said, when did you know it was over? And the Nazi general said, it's never over. It's never over. As long as there are German people, we never acknowledged that we were beaten. We could have fought as a guerrilla movement. We would have fought forever. So that's the mentality. Obviously it's the same mentality that the Zionists have.
I feel I have to say this though, is that like the analogies, I'm always weary of like analogizing to Nazis because it's always this kind of cheap, it's part of the kind of ideological warfare that we've been subject to since before we were born, in terms of like making Nazis out to be the exceptionally evil force of Europe, whereas like they all did the Nazi things just in the global south and the colonized planet. They did it for centuries and were happy to do it, and they built their entire fucking civilizations out of it. But like, yeah, that then, but it feels like that the Hitlerite analogy is interesting and also problematic in the sense that there is a bigger Hitler standing behind them. There is an Ubermensch Hitler standing behind him, and he's drooling in his human diapers. And his second in command is like who hopped up on goofballs all the time. And like they have sneering psychos like Victoria Nuland, who basically signal to the world when they like get fired from their job that, oh yeah, I'm leaving a little terrorist attack behind as a gift. I mean, like if that's not Hitlerite, I don't know what is. Like America is like this nasty evil force, and it's curating this genocide like through its main proxy, Zionist Israel, that it pretends that it can't control but obviously does and ally itself with, and like doesn't need to control in a sort of one-to-one sense. It's not like, but it can just simply give a kind of like carte blanche to that, then unfolds because it knows that its interests are in America's interests.
Well, yeah, where I'm coming from is a little different now. I don't really see Israel and America as separate. I think of them as and America as the boss and Israel's the attack dog or whatever. I see them as like the ruling class. There's like a joint ruling class, and some of them live here and some of them live there, and some of them travel. A lot of them travel back and forth. A lot of them have a home here and a home there, and so they don't really I no longer have that belief that like there's America and then there's Israel, and America is backing Israel. It's like there's a Zionist
they're
ruling
interlaced.
class. There's
it's
a
the
Zionist
same with Europe
Western.
too. Same with Europe.
Western,
absolutely,
like France, England, Germany, America,
one country. It's one
Britain,
country.
and Canada, and whatever, Australia, Australia, New Zealand, whatever. But it's an intertwined Zionist ruling class that we have.
Settler colonial, yes, and Zionism is the tip of their spear.
Well, all right. I
well,
think
we've solved that.
Yeah, we'll stop there. We'll come back. We'll be back. So everybody like and subscribe and do the usual thing.
Everyone, you should read Nora's article. It's really devastating.
Yeah,
it'll haunt you forever.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
And we'll be back to cover. Well, yeah, we'll see how this Iraq Jordan thing develops, and I'm sure there will be an answer for what happened in Iran that we'll also have to cover. So no end in sight means see you in the next one. Hang in there.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks.